Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, everybody. Today I'm interviewing Susan Steinbrecher from Steinbrecher and Associates, Inc. Susan is the author of HeartCentered Leadership. Welcome, Susan. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Excited to be with you. Thank you very much.
All right, great. So before we begin, Susan, why don't you explain to all of our listeners a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I've had my company for about 25 years. We specialize in leadership development, consulting, etc. Previously to starting my company, I was in the hospitality industry, so primarily in hotel operations. I was a general manager of a hotel at the age of 25 and learned all the good things and not so good things about leadership back then. I was then promoted to train general managers for on behalf of the company, and that's really what kind of led me down this whole organizational development and leadership space.
Great. And then when did you decide that you wanted to help others better their lives?
It's a great question. Honestly, as early as I could remember, if I really was to go back, I remember even in high school being involved in community outreach programs, or I was on student council. Certainly going into the hospitality industry, it is a people-pleasing type of business. These are, you're attracted to that industry because you really want to serve and help others. And then certainly in our company, we're all about doing whatever we can to help people be the best they can be, both personally and professionally, through our services and products.
Great. And then I mentioned earlier you were the author of a book called HeartCentered Leadership. Could you tell us what that is exactly?
Yeah. Heart-centered leadership, I guess I like to define heart-centered leadership in this way by pointing out what I think management is versus leadership versus heart-centered leadership. So when I think about what I think management is, to me, it's the process of working through others to achieve organizational initiatives, and that's of course mainly done through planning, organizing, directing, controlling kind of thing. Leadership to me is the ability to really make things happen by encouraging or engaging, inspiring others to maybe a course of action or a vision that you've created for a company. Where heart-centered leadership is those leadership capabilities I just mentioned, but also a heart-centered leader has the wisdom, the courage, and compassion to really lead others, what I would call with authenticity, transparency, humility, and a keen desire to be of service to others, to all those key constituencies that they work with.
Very interesting. And what were some of the unexpected hurdles when you first introduced this concept to businesses?
That's interesting because I'm not sure I would say it was unexpected hurdles, but I can certainly tell you that people thought that Dr. Joel Bennett, my co-author of HeartCentered Leadership, and myself had pretty much lost our mind when we first put this book out. The first, keep in mind, the first edition was published in 2003, and honestly, the word leadership and heart used in the same sentence was pretty rare, much less, putting that smack, on a front cover as your title. So, we did hear that. We did hear, people also assumed with the title that it was a religious book, a religious message. And, in some cases that worked for us, other cases it worked against us. But, basically we didn't care. We just decided, we're going to do this. And the word heart and the word leadership needs to be in the same sentence. That's the problem I think we're all facing. So we decided we're going to put it out there anyway. Then kind of fast forward into current times, we released the second edition of HeartCentered Leadership in 2014. And now there's thousands of books with the word heart and leadership in the same sentence. So we're obviously making progress, which we're very excited about. And it also gave us the unique opportunity, since it was over a decade ago when we first wrote it, to kind of capture all the latest research and stories and interview people using heart-centered leadership practices in their organizations and to tell their stories, which all of that is, of course, showcased in the book. So that's kind of the hurdle we sort of ran up against, although not totally unexpected.
Well, I think we all have some difficult bosses, and I assume this would address their issue, right?
That's true.
and on that note, what is the one common problem you see among your clients?
There's probably, there's a lot of things that show up, but I would say leadership issues for sure. A couple of key things, how to think more strategically and less tactically. We have a lot of managers, leaders that just get in the weeds. They have a really hard time of letting go, which is one of our principles in Heart-Centered Leadership. It's called letting go. They have a hard time doing that and letting others lead, providing appropriate course of action, but then let other people and empower them to, go and get the job done without meddling. So that's certainly a thing we see. Another thing we're really seeing more and more today is people have a very hard time with what I call the conflict types of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be they have a conflict with a boss or a peer, an employee, or whatever it is, we see that those conversations that really need to be had are often avoided, which of course just, makes matters worse. Or if they are had, they're often done so poorly and so disrespectfully that nothing positive comes from that, and things, again, get worse. So this actually led us, recently, we're in the middle of developing this now, this led us to adopting our own sort of conflict resolution materials, training materials, models, assessments, and everything. We're kind of in, beta and then pilot tests coming up now, but we just saw a huge need in the world for this. At a macro level, we all see what's going on in our world and the conflict that is showing up through multiple ways, but also in the workplace and certainly also in the home. And our hope is we will first take this probably to the business community, but then we hope to take the same skills and teach people in schools and prisons and homes, et cetera, because we really just see a huge need here.
Mm-hmm. And as it's often the case, change is difficult, right?
Yes.
So what are some of the common misconceptions your clients have about making changes?
Yeah, I think for managers who implement change, I think they really underestimate how disruptive that can be. You're always going to have your sort of camps out there. You're going to have the early adopters, those employees that say, yep, got it, going to do it, and they're off and running. They're fully adopted and ready to help any way they can. And you want to latch on to those folks and leverage those people as champions for the change. You're going to have your heavy resistors, which are kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, that, everything is, we're not going to do that, I don't want to do that, dragging their heels. But really the mass of people are sort of in the middle, and we call that the kind of wait and see group. So, you need to be aware that there are the camps, and then how do you leverage those early adopters to help the other two groups come along? And I think another thing that I see is, and a big mistake, because I coach a lot of executives in multiple industries, and, when they're ready to announce the change or the whatever it is, the integration or the big change initiative or an acquisition or whatever it is, they always want to present this, very buttoned down, beautiful PowerPoint presentation stating the business case for doing this. And of course, you can do that, but that's not the first step. And what I see is missed almost 100% of the time is that first step is you need to first ask yourself as a leader, what are the feelings and emotions that our employees are experiencing right now? And if you don't address that first, you are not going to get the trust. You're going to find a whole bunch of people dragging their heels, and you're not going to get too many of those early adopters. So you need to first say things like, how are you feeling about this change? What are your fears? What are your concerns? How can we support you through that? What do you need from us? And then communicate on steroids. If you don't communicate, they're going to make up their own story. And then once they've built trust with you because they see that you care about how they're feeling, you're empathetic to the disruption that may be causing them, they'll build trust with you, and then they'll hear your message. They may not like it, but they'll definitely hear it, and they'll certainly look at that and say, hey, at least this person told me the truth, and I can trust that.
Now that, that's when you're in front of them, that you're able to convince them that they need to change. But for some of our listeners who are in that position as owners or executives, how could they determine that they should call you? Is there a way to identify the kind of problem you actually solve that they could relate to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that our specialty is certainly leadership issues, communication issues, and conflict. Those are probably our three main, and leadership is a wide net that can be cast under multiple things, but we know that's why, I've written the book HeartCentered Leadership. I wrote a book, Ken Show, Roadmap to Success. It was a collaborative effort with multiple authors. These are all tools and things that you want people to know that, there is help and resources out there. So anything around those three main titles would really elicit a call to get more information from us.
Okay. This addresses the business owners and executives. So what about employees now that are listening to this podcast and are saying, hey, man, my boss could really use her as a coach?
Yeah.
How would you address this with your boss if you were in their position? Offer them a copy of the book, or how would you do
it's funny. I've heard that a lot. I mean, when people hear the name of the book, they say, oh, my gosh, my boss needs that. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you how often I hear that. You certainly can do that, and that might be a bit tricky depending on the relationship you have. They may see that as an insult if you don't have a good, solid relationship. But, to your point about what does the employee, get out of this too, I mean, employee working in that type of environment is going to be much more empowered. They're going to be working in a much more empowering, kind of caring workplace that what I call builds commitment to the company and to the leader of the company versus compliance, which, I may do it because you tell me to. The minute you turn your back, my heart's not in this, I'm not going to do it. And certainly a much more motivated employee. I mean, employees who want to come to work versus feel like they have to come to work is a huge benefit for both the leader and the employee. And I think all of us at the end of the day, we want to feel like we're contributing in some significant way to others. I mean, we want to know we're making some kind of a difference. And these employees get to experience that. So they benefit from this, and then certainly talking to their managers about, hey, this is something that I heard about. I thought you might be interested. Obviously present that delicately if they're handing the person the book.
Well, that was great. So before we wrap it up, what one piece of advice can you give to someone who wants to start developing that connected, relationship-based workplace, but doesn't really know where to start?
Thank you for asking that, because I think before anybody adopts anything, I mean, this is where, there's a million books out there with a million different themes and strategies. And I will tell you, employees get very, sort of jaded by the flavor of the month program. So the first thing really is to ask yourself, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to develop this type of a workplace and this type of environment? What is your overall purpose for doing that? Your overall mission and vision, because you're going to need to communicate that, and they're going to need to see that level of passion to buy into what you're doing. And then I would say start studying companies that are known for this. This style of leadership is what those companies embrace as a culture. So probably the one that comes to my mind immediately is Conscious Capitalism, is a book written by John Mackey, co-CEO and founder of Whole Foods. And he started basically this association or this group called Conscious Capitalism. So the members who attend those meetings, that go to those conferences, are going to be all over the HeartCentered Leadership message. And the least thing is to at least read his books. You understand what it means to be a conscious capitalist and know that HeartCentered Leadership is a part of that message. So those would be just some kind of top of mind.
That sounds great. That's great stuff, Susan. I mean, thank you so much for being here today and sharing some of your stories with us. Now, how can our listeners learn more or get in touch with you?
Thank you for asking. Certainly our websites, we have a couple of websites. We have the HeartCenteredLeadership.com website. That's easy to spell it all out, HeartCenteredLeadership.com. And then certainly our company website as well is Steinbrecher.com, and that's STEINBRECHER, Steinbrecher.com. And we're very active in social media. You can certainly look up my name, look up my company name, and be connected through LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, etc.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you very much for taking the time to share your knowledge with our listeners, Susan. It was a real pleasure.
Have you're a great welcome. Day. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.